Elliott says his diary showed between Monday and Thursday, he had 5 meetings related to his transport portfolio, and does not believe any were cancelled. However, the first time he met his Transport Secretary Rob Sharp, who Elliott makes no secret of disliking, was this week when Perrottet hauled them both in to bury the hatchet. The Premier's message was clear: the pair needed to work constructively together in the interest of NSW. Meanwhile, throughout last week, the likelihood of the shutdown was being war-gamed within the Transport Department. In fact, documents tabled to the industrial umpire suggest the agency had known for days that it was a live possibility if negotiations worsened. Premier Dominic Perrottet arrives for a press conference at Sydney International Airport as the train network was shut down. Brook Mitchell. Several departments were providing contingency plans to the Transport Department, and the state's chief economist Stephen Walters had been asked to model the economic impacts of a shutdown. Perrottet and Elliott are adamant they had no idea about the preparatory work that was underway. The transport debacle has provided yet another headache for Perrottet, who is 4 months into the top job, but has had no honeymoon period. A grim summer, which saw the Omicron wave sweep across the state, was not a good start for the new Premier. Determined to stick to his decision to relax restrictions on December 15, Perrottet pushed ahead with his plan. But he did so as COVID-19 case numbers were skyrocketing into the thousands, and even his colleagues started to question his decision. Perrottet had a change of heart a week later and reintroduced mandatory masks and density limits in pubs and restaurants. He maintains he did not regret his decision, but he was widely criticised for his haste. NSW Transport Minister David Elliott met with the rail union on Tuesday. Brook Mitchell. A Super Saturday of by-elections earlier this month, including in former Premier Gladys Berejiklian's seat of Willoughby, was a baptism of fire for the new Premier. The Liberals lost the once safe seat of Bega, formerly held by the former Transport Minister Andrew Constance, and came dangerously close to losing Willoughby. Perrottet remained stoic, stressing that despite slipping further into minority government after the loss of a seat, his government was still in a strong position to govern. However, Monday's rail meltdown revealed some very significant cracks in his third-term government, as well as exposing how bitter the industrial relations battles with frontline workers are likely to be in the coming year, including with nurses and teachers. It also revealed a level of complacency and hubris within his team. Senior government sources say a fundamental misunderstanding between Elliott's chief of staff and a senior transport bureaucrat during a late-night phone call on Sunday meant the minister went to bed without knowing what was about to unfold. After that brief call, at 10:43 p.m., the chief of staff messaged the bureaucrat, "The minister has been briefed and is happy with our position." Loading Elliott's office thought they had been briefed about widespread disruption across the network on Monday, while the transport bureaucrat hung up the phone believing they had spelled out the full implications of what could soon occur, including a shutdown. The transport minister, still disappointed about losing his former portfolio of police, did not help the situation when he seemingly brushed off all responsibility and said even if the rail bureaucrats had called him in the middle of the night to alert him of the shutdown, he would not have answered his phone anyway. A clearly unimpressed Perrottet, who had been wanting to use his energy to blame Labour and their union mates for grinding the city to a halt, instead had to publicly admonish Elliott and stress that he expected all his ministers to be available 24 hours a day. To cap off a bad week for Perrottet, exclusive polling for the Herald showed that opposition leader Chris Minns has leapfrogged him and is now the preferred premier. The Resolve Political Monitor found that Minns is the preferred premier among 32% of voters, with Perrottet trailing at 29%. However, 39% of voters were undecided on who should lead NSW. For the first time in a decade, Labour is competitive. Its primary vote has climbed to 34%, although still too low to win, while the coalition's has slipped to 37%, down from 41%. A senior government source, speaking on the condition of anonymity, says Perrottet's major problem is he isn't Gladys. There is still a halo over Gladys, almost like she can do no wrong, and that makes it very hard for Dom, the source says. However, Labour still has some way to go despite its significant improvement in its polling. As the government was floundering in the aftermath of the debacle, Minns held back from calling for Elliott's head for days. Acutely aware of his predecessor, Jody McKee's tendency to flippantly demand resignations. It left a sense among some within the party that Minns had missed an opportunity to hit Elliott and the government harder. One senior Labour source says, Chris is also naturally more cautious and even-keeled. He doesn't overreact to things, he even underreacts sometimes. Loading it was not until Thursday afternoon that Minns demanded Elliott's resignation, insisting that the minister had either lost control of his department or had misled the public. By this stage, it was 4 days since a late-night hearing of Fair Work on Sunday failed to resolve differences between the government and the rail union over the latter's ban on altered working, a change from a train crew's planned roster. The hearing was adjourned on Sunday night without a breakthrough. However, within the next few hours, Sydney Trains chief executive Matt Longland made the final decision to shut the network. Longland deemed it was too unsafe to run trains. It was a dramatic turnaround from less than 24 hours earlier, when a Fair Work commissioner congratulated the two sides on reaching a settlement. When Sydneysiders woke up on Monday to the shock news that the rail network had been shut, Perrottet and Elliott launched a blistering attack on the union and Labour to wedge the opposition and deflect blame for the disruption. For a short time, it worked. People wait for buses near Central Station after all Sydney trains and Trainlink services were stopped on Monday. Kate Garata, however, it then became clear that it was the government, not the unions, who had brought the city to a standstill. The major failing from the government's perspective was reflected in the brinkmanship that played out this week, which saw the transport agency end up effectively making the call to lock out staff, a senior transport insider says.